Napoleon's miscalculations and the timely arrival of Prussian reinforcements led to his defeat at Waterloo. This decisive loss marked the end of his rule, compelling him to abdicate and ultimately face exile on the remote island of St. Helena.
Exile, the expulsion from one's native land by authoritative decree or to banish someone from their country. And these historical figures, from politics to entertainment, had all been exiled. And I'm here to talk about them today, so let's jump right in, shall we? We're gonna start things off with Eartha Kitt. This American singer, actress, and cabaret star faced a period of exile from the United States in the 60s. Her exile was primarily a result of her outspoken views on racial and social issues, as well as her vocal opposition to the Vietnam War. She was invited to the White House by Lady Bird Johnson, and during that time, she'd expressed her concerns and views on the United States' handling of the war and their constant disregard for the civilians affected. She discussed poverty and other issues, and from that meeting, which evidently did not go so great, she was kicked out, blacklisted, and ostracized. She lived in Europe for a while, where she lived a successful career, and when she returned in the 70s, she was still one of the most amazing and influential figures of our time, and one of the best catwomen out there. I think actually probably the best. I can't think of anyone better, really. On the opposite end of the scale, we have Napoleon. He was not a cool cat. He was more like an overly ambitious mouse. At least that's what he's jokingly known for nowadays. Like, Napoleon, he was so short, he thought he was so great, but he was small. He was actually more like 5'6", maybe even 5'7", which I don't think is any height to write home about as being super short or anything, especially for the time he was around. I think his guards were taller than him, and that's kind of always give the illusion that he was super short. Anyway, I'm not projecting or anything because I am his height. After his defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba, but he escaped and briefly returned to power before facing a final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Following this, he was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died in 1821. But of course, as we travel through time, when it comes to historic influencers, a Roman poet by the name of Ovid was banished from Rome by Emperor Augustus in 8 CE. Now, the exact reasons for his exile are still a bit of a mystery, but Ovid himself suggested it was because of a poem and a mistake he made. I mean, maybe it was too spicy, too political. Maybe the mistake was just so embarrassing he left on his own. Didn't have Grammarly check his mistakes. But he spent the rest of his life in Tomis, or modern-day Romania, where he wrote his famous work Tristia, or Sorrows, maybe as a memento to his life in Rome and his memories of living there. But either way, as a man of great writing, he wasn't the only Roman banished. A great writer, but also a great philosopher, Seneca, a Stoic philosopher, statesman, and tutor to Emperor Nero, faced exile in 41 CE. He was accused of adultery with Julia Livilla, Caligula's sister, and was sent to Corsica. But he was later recalled from exile and played a big role in Nero's early reign before falling out of favor again. But this was because Nero was getting more erratic and tyrannical, and when Seneca found himself constantly fighting with him, it was under the impression he was also trying to conspire a plot to take Nero out. And not like out to dinner, but like out as in die. But since there was no actual evidence of this, and it was just Nero being Nero, Seneca was then heavily pressured, or in general just being compelled to take his own life. When it comes to political figures or key figures of influence, Leon Trotsky was expelled as well from his land during the October Revolution of 1917. But he became involved in a power struggle with Joseph Stalin after Lenin's death in 1924. Trotsky advocated for permanent revolution and international socialism, while Stalin focused on socialism in one country. As a key figure in the Russian Revolution, Trotsky was expelled from the Soviet Union by Joseph Stalin in 1929. He lived in various countries like Turkey, France, and Norway before finally settling in Mexico. And it is in Mexico where he would meet a violent end. just a few months before he died, there was a failed attempt on his life when men armed with machine guns fired into his home. But on August 20th, 1940, a Spanish communist and Stalinist agent by the name of Ramon Mercader broke in and finished the job, up close and personal, with a ice pick. Influencing people through the written word has always gotten folks in trouble, even if it was just stating what they'd observed. Take Sir Thomas More, for example, who wrote the fascinating book Utopia, which in 1500 was a very interesting concept at the time of unifying people through education regardless of their economic status. But as an educated man, he was also left to see and witness his nation unfold at the hands of King Henry VIII. He wasn't alone in his sentiments. Sir Thomas More, also the Lord Chancellor of England, fell out of favor with King Henry VIII because of his refusal to acknowledge the king as the supreme head of the Church of England. More was then imprisoned and punished by death in 1535. Of course, as political positions go, before becoming the leader of North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh spent many years in exile. He traveled to various countries like France, the United States, and the Soviet Union, seeking support for Vietnamese independence. He returned to Vietnam and became a key figure in the struggle against French colonial rule. After the division of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh led the North Vietnamese government in its efforts to reunify the country. As a result, the split between the North and the South led to a violent and malicious conflict that spilled the blood of countless people. Again, with the Roman Empire, another exiled figure was that of Cicero. Cicero, the renowned Roman statesman, orator, and philosopher, was exiled in 58 BCE during the political upheavals of the late Roman Republic. His exile was a result of his opposition to the First Triumvirate, particularly his criticism of Julius Caesar's policies. But unlike some of the folks on this list who ended up dying horribly as a result of their actions, Cicero was eventually allowed to return to Rome after his period of exile. Next up, we have the Nazino Tragedy. Now, unlike every other point on this list, this wasn't just one person being exiled, but thousands. And why were they exiled? Well, I'm about to tell you, so just hold on to your horses. The Nazino Tragedy, which happened in 1933, was a very disturbing chapter in Soviet history. Basically, the Soviet government decided that it would be a good idea to exile a bunch of so-called anti-Soviet elements to this remote island called Nazino in Siberia. They crammed about 6,000 people, the mix of criminals, political descendants, and just regular folks who got on the wrong side of authorities, onto this desolate island. The problem was, there was next to nothing there. No housing, no proper food, just nada. People were left to fend for themselves in the freezing wilderness, and as you can imagine, what happened was a total nightmare. Starvation and disease hit, desperate for food. Some, in an attempt to survive, took the lives of others. Reports even say that some resorted to extreme measures. Let's just say they started eating each other. The whole thing was a colossal disaster, and by the end, almost 4,000 people were dead. But finally, we have Sinead O'Connor. Now, although she wasn't exiled by her country, she was exiled by the music industry, certainly. From refusing to allow the American national anthem to be played before her concerts to boycotting the Grammys. It was her stunt on the 1992 Saturday Night Live that would seal her exile from the industry. Since then, her eventful life and challenges have unfolded under the scrutiny of the public. After her performance on Saturday Night Live in 1992, where she tore a photograph of Pope John Paul II, O'Connor faced exile from the music industry. On that fateful night, looking directly into the camera, O'Connor passionately sang an a cappella version of Bob Marley's War. As she sang the lyrics, "We have confidence in good over evil," O'Connor held up a picture of Pope John Paul II towards the camera and tore the photograph into pieces and hurled them towards the camera, saying, "Fight the real enemy." Later, O'Connor faced a hostile reception at a Bob Dylan tribute concert held at Madison Square Garden, leading to her being booed off stage. All right, well, that's all for today. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to like and subscribe. I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.